Welcome to the ReSaulved podcast, where we dissect all of the themes, legal and otherwise, from the TV show Better Call Saul.
Hello, hello. I would love to introduce my special guest today, Sheila Grela. This has been her first time watching Better Call Saul, so I'm very excited to hear what she has to say, and I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
I'm very much a paralegal. I've been a paralegal for many, many years now. On my resume, it just says over 20, but I I really am a diehard paralegal. I won't be changing, even though I do work toward understanding e-discovery. I am not ever going to shift to a support role, litigation support role, although I know many paralegals who have. It isn't me. I really take being a paralegal as my life's calling. So
Nice.
it's kind of a serious thing for me. I also think that one of the things that's important about saying I'm a paralegal is to say that I really want other paralegals to be proud of being a paralegal, because even though there have been a lot of discussions about it being a non attorney position, the truth of the matter is we are the ones that help with so much that a lot of people don't know. And I honestly believe that we contribute to almost every portion of the law firm will. And I am not shocked by the recent stealing of paralegals into the legal operation world. So so things that have improved can also cause problems on the other side, but a lot of the things that have improved have streamlined processes that we don't even think about anymore. I know a lot of people laugh about who uses faxes. Well, there's a lot of things that are really interesting about that, and that is that now email seems to be going the way of faxes.
Yeah, that's certainly a conversation that I've been hearing, and also makes watching Better Call Saul, because it's set from 2002 to 2008, I believe, right?
Mhm.
Makes watching it so interesting because it's like, oh, right, I remember when we were still using flip phones, and right? Like you watch, especially in this episode. So today we're going to be talking about season 2, episode 5, called Rebecca. And what I was going to point to was, in many of the scenes, Kim is doing doc review and she's got the highlighter out, and she's in like the basement and it's dark. And I mean, a lot of that is done for like theatrical drama, right? Like the lighting. But yeah, so I know that you do a lot of work with paralegals, and we're definitely going to get to that at the end as well, because I want people to know about the virtual lunches and all of that. I've participated in some of them, and they're fantastic. But yeah, so let's dive right into the episode. What was your feeling kind of overall after you finished watching it?
I had deja vu about LA law. Okay,
Yes!
I said it. LA
LA
law.
Law, yes. Oh my God, I used to love that show.
And the thing of it is the reason I had deja vu was not the storyline, was not the concept. It was the feeling I had afterwards. It was the same sort of feeling I used to have after watching LA Law. Okay, what are they going to do next? I mean, there were so many semi-crude and ridiculous things that happened at LA Law that, you could talk about them, but to me it was more episodic in the fact that where is this character going to go? Please don't let this character step into an elevator, a shaft like that other, I mean, not that we're going to be dramatic, but that's really how I felt when I was watching LA Law. It was killing people before Game of Thrones, okay? It really did.
Right. Yeah.
But
totally.
so I have to give Better Call Saul kudos, because there was no violence in this one, and that in itself was great. And I also felt like the dialogue was of a regular cadence. So sometimes when you watch legal dramas, their cadence is almost as if they're trying to speak so fast that they don't care if the person who's listening to them hears them. And
Right.
And this was not that feeling. This was, okay, they're engaging, they're pausing, and they're having a real conversation, which I give you kudos for, first off. And then I also give it kudos for the fact that it didn't try and explain things as it went.
No, I think they do a really great job of weaving the stories throughout every single episode, and that is one of the it's another thing I really like about the show, is that it's just very well written, right? There are some episodes where you have no idea what's going to happen and what's going on with the characters, and then there are other episodes where they've just fanned it out so perfectly, right? You know exactly what's coming because it's the only thing that can come based on what is happening. So you had the same feeling as you had when you had watched LA Law. So the episode opens up with a flashback to when Chuck and Rebecca were still married. So there's going to be spoilers for you too, since you haven't watched some of the other episodes. One of the things that struck me about the beginning of that scene is not just Jimmy's like enthusiasm and he's trying, you can clearly see that he's trying to like fit in and maybe say the right thing or at least get them to laugh, right? So he starts telling like the lawyer jokes. But one of the things that I really picked up on in that scene was some of the physical gestures that Chuck makes in subsequent and previous episodes. He makes really similar gestures when he's having one of his like episodes. And so I thought that was really interesting, something I didn't pick up on like the first time I watched it. What were your thoughts on that
I thought
scene?
there was a really evident parallel between the flashback where he's talking to his ex and explaining things, and then he jumps into the present, is explaining to Miss Wexler why his brother is the way he is. And the thing of it is you can, when you hear him say that, you realize that he has that attitude even when he's sitting at the table face to face with his brother.
Exactly.
You're not gonna shock me. You're gonna hurt me, because that's just what you do. And I'm not saying it's a reasonable feeling. He just acknowledges it in a different way in two spans of time.
Yeah.
And in the current, he's a little more upfront, and in the other one, he's more like, well, let's see how this can go and what's going to happen. One thing you could definitely see is that he's missing that emotional piece that he had in the flashback, and it's almost like they're trying to say that emotional piece left with her.
Yeah.
I mean, my point is that you get the idea of what's going on without anyone ever explaining it. And to me, that's finesse in writing. And I saw some of that in here, in that they weren't trying to use words to convey a feeling. They were trying to get you to get to the feeling yourself by choosing the cadence of the character. She took the Post-its, and it starts trying to find a lead, and can't find a place to sit, can't find a place that's private, conference room, the hallway, the bathroom, I think at one point.
Yeah.
The garage, and of course the garage has to be rainy and really looking very cold to get the picture across. So all of those things were for the purpose of making us know how she felt. She felt like she was out in the cold and the rain in the garage.
Yeah, I love all of those scenes where she's like frantically trying to dig out of this hole, right? And then, and she even says that to Jimmy, right? When he comes in when he comes to visit her at the office, and he's like, oh, I've got a plan to get you out of this. And she's like, no, you don't get me out of this. I get me out of this. Like, we're not playing that game. Yeah. She's one of my favorite characters too. She's very strong. And you also, as her character progresses too, I always kind of get the feeling that, there's something that she's not telling you, and that she absolutely knows more than she's letting on. Right?
I understand. I might talk a lot, but I do value the fact that there are people who don't talk a lot, and what they say is so very important. I also got the feeling, which I could be wrong because I haven't watched any of the shows before and after, that they are almost proverb type moments in the show. Like, so for example, the Kim Wessler thing of, I'm going to rescue myself.
Mm-hmm.
That was a proverb to me. That was about, I have to deal with someone who thinks they can fix everything.
I've definitely had those conversations before. I'm not asking for your advice. I'm just telling you what's going on.
Well,
yeah.
I've been married to my husband for decades now. So I can actually honestly say that men have their own way of dealing with things, but the protective vibe is real, no matter how modern they are. That's what I got out of that, was that she had already learned that lesson.
It comes out. In fact, it's the episode right after this one, that she comes from a really small little town in the middle of nowhere. Right. And yeah, so she does have that kind of very focused vision, and she does get a lot of those really great one-liners that do sound they're very much words to live by, proverbs, right? That sort of thing of like, these are the pillars by which she judges her behavior and her actions, and the choices, the decisions she makes with the choices she has in front of her. One of the other things that, kind of guts me about this episode every time I watch it is when Kim and Howard are standing in front of HHM after the Mesa Page and Kevin have left, and Kim feels fairly triumphant, and Howard is like, but you've got a lot of work to do in doc review. There's no reason for you to take any next steps, right? And you can just see the look on her face of, it's a little bit indignation, and then it's also a realization that she's not going to get what she wants at this firm for whatever reason, right? Reasons beyond her control.
Yes, and that is a very shocking thing when you think about all of the women who have left their jobs in the last 3 years because they didn't feel heard. And I am not ultra advocate of anything. I just believe, and you can't have a good group of people unless you have a reasonable amount of diversity and belonging within it. And when you listen to women who are in my position at corporations that talk about the good old boy syndrome still going on, there's both sides of that. I hear some women, well, you got to make them your advocates. Well, I get how being in a group and not feeling like you're going to get any attention can be a problem. And what I see is some of the women who think the solution is getting the men to adopt it are like my sister that is a bright and shining star. You can get their attention. Mm-hmm. I can't. So, I get my attention from my supervisors by trying to give them insight and helping. And sometimes I've been shocked at the response. Opposite of her experience, I was in a meeting and the meeting was winding up, and I had my boss with me, and his boss was there. And it was a really important meeting. We ended it. And then the big boss asked my boss what was going on with a new case that came in, and he explained it. I didn't interrupt. I just was listening. And then after he explained it to the big boss goes through this big tirade and talks about the next steps and why. And my boss didn't interrupt. But when he was done, he said, I know all that. Sheila told me that yesterday. You kind of
I love
picked me
it.
up from the floor.
I love it.
And,
Right.
yeah. So, you have both sides of the experience. But when you have someone like this Kim character, it isn't about what kind of work she's doing. It isn't about who she is or her position. It's about the fact that she's uncomfortable in what is happening to her. I'll be honest, I don't believe that all the women that left in the last 3 years left and didn't say anything. I think they were saying things and people didn't want to listen.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. I mean, so yes, absolutely. I agree that women are not being heard. And Kim certainly is, it's not even that she's not being heard. She's not being seen. She's not being treated justly. She's not being rewarded for good work. It's interesting to her relationship with Howard. And then of course the scene that you mentioned before where she's talking with Chuck, because she knows that it's Howard, but Jimmy thinks that it's Chuck, and then of course they show the audience that it actually is Howard, right? Howard is more upset because Howard has to worry about the firm. And so the reason why she's being punished is because she knew about a commercial that Jimmy made to get more participants into a class action lawsuit against a senior living facility. And she didn't say anything. And she absolutely knew that both law firms that were involved, the one that Jimmy's working at and the one that she's working at, would be upset about it. And so this is what she's got to dig out of that hole, right?
Well,
yeah.
Been there, done that. I have a tendency to make decisions based on, well, why is that happening? And then I go and find out things. And then it's like, I know this. Do I have to tell someone? And so sometimes the people who can keep their mouths shut are so much better off. And the people who can not look in the first place, they're really much better off. But
yeah.
when you're talking about Kim, the other thing I get is that in the future, from where she is now, her motivation is going to change because she is in a box, but she doesn't plan on staying there. So the definite sense you get is, yeah, she's motivated and she's motivated by this, but you don't know what's going to drive her for her next motivation because you don't believe she's going to be stuck in this box forever. So
That's
it's
right.
kind of like not so much foreshadowing is, well, let's see what's going to happen and motivate her next.
Yeah, and the partner that wants to explain to her, who asks her to make him coffee after she says she doesn't want any, when he clearly knows now that she's been working all night long. Like, that was one of my favorite scenes in this episode, that little interaction right before they sit down in his office and talk, where he's like, coffee? And she's like, no, I'm good. And he's like, could you make me some? and it's just like, if that wasn't the last straw, I mean, the very next episode, the storyline continues and you start to see what happens. And, Kim is one of my favorite characters, but if that wasn't the nail in the coffin, I don't know what is. And you're right. It does. It touches on so many things that women deal with in the workplace. For a long time, I was always the person taking notes in all the meetings, right? Like I was the only one who knew how to type. I mean, now granted, I was the most organized person in the room as well on my team. So there you go. But yeah, I was always the one taking notes. And that idea of getting coffee for a male peer, just because, well, and he's not a peer, obviously he's senior to her, right? He's a named partner. But that idea of, it doesn't matter that she's a lawyer, she should just go make him coffee.
I apologize, but when he said that, all I could see was Lenny and Squiggy, and I know that there might be people on here who have no idea what I'm talking about, but I saw that character he played, who was so clueless and so one-dimensional in his attitude. And that's, to me, what was wrong. It was one-dimensional because there were so many other ways to have engaged her, to have gotten her to do it, to have simply said, I'm sorry, I've had a really rough night, and as you know, I don't do well. Would you consider? I mean, it should have been a little more endearing of a question. Yeah, to some women, they just want to hear the question and move on. But I don't think that was what she wanted. She wanted some acknowledgement. And I honestly think that's another thing that you can see in the show is that the lack of acknowledgement that continues in the workplace has more to do with other people trying to get what they want done, period. And I heard it said, and I have to agree, that really good managers are being burnt out because they're worrying about everyone else being burnt out. And so you get a, and I always tell, which is probably a cliche, I always tell people who say, I'm worrying about whether I'm a really good parent, or I'm worrying about whether well, you're not a bad parent or a bad spouse. Why? Because bad spouses and bad parents don't think about what they are. Right. You can make mistakes, but they, and I can deal with just about anything as far as if someone will admit they're trying to deal with something. But my hardest problem is when you have people who are entitled and nasty and won't acknowledge that that's what they are. They think that everyone else should just change. And you see a little of that in here. You're going to change, not me. Yeah. You're going to change, not me. Yeah, you're going to change, not me.
Yeah, that's absolutely Chuck. And you see it throughout this episode, but some, subsequent episodes, definitely. He believes that he knows better than everybody else, and that he is the most just person in the world, and he's going by the letter of the law and what is ethical, and he's constantly telling lies. He's really doing a lot of the same kind of hustler type moves that Jimmy is doing and some of the other characters are doing, but he's acting like he's above it all. So as I'm like checking the clock, so I know we got to like wind down. But I wanted to just quickly touch on what, your reaction to Jimmy's interaction with the second year associate at Davis and Maine, and how she's nitpicking about the recycling bin and like the garbage can, and here are all of my notes, right? Not that she's nitpicking about the notes, but that's how he feels about it, right? And also the scene where they go to the courthouse and she's like, I'm trying to keep you out of trouble.
Well, first of all, she's completely ignoring the entitlement issue, which you have to ask yourself, is that working for her? Because Kim acknowledges the entitlement issue, that the people above her. Now, as someone who has experienced other people's pain because of it, the caste system is convenient, but is it reasonable? No. So should this girl feel entitled to try and get him to flow over to her side? In my world, he would have said, go tell my secretary. All of those things are things that someone else needs to do. I've seen a lot of male attorneys change their methods by their secretaries always changing it and reminding them politely and gently about what the problem was, as opposed to what she's doing, which is, let me beat you upside the head. And and the thing of it is you have to look at people's personalities from both sides. I don't know, because I haven't watched enough to get the feeling what Jimmy's personality is, but I know I've seen people struggle with me because my personality is someone who sees things all over the place like this. And
Mm-hmm.
then if I work with an attorney who sees things completely in a line, sometimes they're like, I don't get it. And, it can take a bit for them to get used to the fact that I see things differently than they do.
Yeah.
But I admit that that's the problem. And acknowledging how people are influenced by their personality to treat other people makes your life easier. I had no trouble with the curmudgeon who had discipline in a different area than being an attorney before he became an attorney, because I understood. I'd worked with experts who had his same background, and I know how they are. They just do things a certain way, and you just decide to get used to it, and then, I think that's one of the big things that is a political thing in law offices is not the politics, it's the drastic difference in personalities. Especially if you're a paralegal or a legal secretary and you work for more than 3 people, it gets very difficult to remember which attorney wants everything in a notebook and which attorney wants you to just email it to them, because it's just so confusing. And sometimes you just get a hold of it by remembering their personality and, how they work. But on the other side, I don't like Kim. I don't think they gave her the benefit of her personality. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, her, so in this episode, her relationship with Howard is very strained. And in subsequent episodes, it's strained as well. But Howard is an interesting character. He has many more layers to him and I think his character is developed much slower than some of the other characters on the show, because there are definitely moments where you can see in him that he's a decent person, but also his focus is driving rather the firm higher and higher. And so anything that gets in the way of that is problematic for him. It's in the same way that, Mike, who we didn't even touch on that character really, like, you can mess with him, but if you start messing with his daughter-in-law and his granddaughter, all of that, and you see that same type of behavior pattern with all of the characters in different ways throughout the show, which is also why I think it's just like so well written. So any final thoughts on your first episode of Better Call Saul?
I think the most impactful thing that I saw the entire time was the moment that Kim realized she wasn't going to receive any acknowledgement for bringing in that gentleman, because all of us can remember a feeling of, why is this happening? And am I supposed to react? And the truth of the matter is, she could have reacted, but she did what every smart woman does. Is it going to get me what I want? Is reacting going to get me what I want? And the sad thing is, if she'd been a man and reacted, it would have got him what he wanted. That is really the sad thing, is that men can react, and the way they react will not automatically be assumed to be emotional. It will be assumed to be, well, I need to ask myself this question. Whereas a woman reacting to being treated bad is, you're emotional. So, and I know that I read a book a while ago, and one of the things it talked about with girls was that you shouldn't tell a girl that her value is related to her beauty, because no matter what happens, every girl goes through a gangly stage. And the book made a very valid point. You may not believe that they notice when people stop commenting on their beauty, but they do notice. So if you're commenting on their value and their character and how they treat others, you will continue to do that, because that doesn't change when they're in the gangly stage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
Totally.
that's another part of this is the the men get treated well, but they don't have to continue to do more to get treated well. And
Yeah. It's assumed.
it's very evident that she got the message. I'm in this box with boxes, and if I want out, I have to go above and beyond what anyone else would do. And that is a message that's commonplace, I think, to a lot of women. Is you're going to have to show me something more.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I also just realized that the episode is called Rebecca, but we spent most of the conversation talking about Kim, and the episode really is focused very much on her. So that also is an interesting little tidbit that I'm going to have in the back of my mind as I'm watching subsequent episodes for this podcast. So thank you so much. This has been such a lovely conversation, and I want to give you an opportunity to let the audience know about the virtual lunches.
Great. During the pandemic, we had a mixer that was virtual, trying to replace our normal in-person ventures for the San Diego Paralegal Association. And we had more people than usually come to even the in-person events. And they were all saying the same thing. We feel like no one's talking to us. It's horrible. We're at home. There's just no professional kind of conversation, no camaraderie. We don't know what to do. So I went to my mentor and I said, will you support me with ideas and help me? I would like to set this up for 2 months. And she's like, well, what are you going to start with? I'm like, I'm going to ask Angela King from Denton's if she'll come in and talk about teamwork, because it's something she does all the time. Okay. So I had the questions. We did it. This was in August of 2020. And I can be honest, I will never watch that videotape of myself. But the evolution of the series has been that it kept getting everyone wanting more and more. And this year we added MCLEs at the end of each month. And you were kind enough, as well as your cohorts, who I adore, to give us one on project management for our MCLE.
Right.
Now, we have managed, because this particular thing is free, to get people to help us with the marketing and with so much more. I have to say that we have so many other associations who are willing to help us. Women in E helps us all the time.
I love Women in E.
Yeah. I got elected to be the program manager for San Diego starting.
Oh, congratulations.
For 2 years. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, I think that everyone would like to feel they have a means to network, and that's what's going to happen continuing on to next year. But we're going to change things up a little. We're going to keep the MCLE, which means there's 10 free MCLEs from January until October. November and December, there aren't, because that's the holidays, is the last Friday.
Right.
And then we did a survey and everyone wants training. So we're going to start doing training, and I have appointments with a couple of teachers and trainers, and we're going to try and do what everyone wants. And so I will be inviting you, and we'll be doing something together, I'm sure. And I will say this, that training and continual training is going to be an issue in the next 5 years, because everyone needs it and they're not sure how to find it, and they're not sure how to do things. You can learn by networking, by talking, by listening. It doesn't have to be the boring 5-hour read of a book. You can definitely get stuff. And I know that I learned a lot from your wonderful cartoon stuff on the project management. And I do have one last thing to say about that. And I think you're going to agree with me that every legal professional needs to consider what business acumen they need to add to their chest, whether it be project management, whatever it is, your clients are going to be more and more into these different things for their business, and you're going to need to understand them. So I don't tell people you need to go learn project management. I tell them you need to understand how your client is using project management. And there is a distinction. I can know how an accountant does my taxes. Do I do the taxes? No, but I need to know what he does. And it's
Right.
the same sort of thing. We need to know what our clients do. And
Yeah,
SD,
absolutely.
it's WWSD paralegals with an S.org. Sign up. It's free. And we take any requests, and we will always hand over our hosting duties to anyone. We have one coming up that is going to be hilarious because it's two stellar women, and one's going to be interviewing the other. MC Singale is going to interview Antoinette Balda, and Antoinette won the Orange County Attorney of the Year, and
amazing.
she runs the Veterans Legal Institute. And
very cool.
And then MC Sagala has her own podcast every day. I don't know how she does it. Every business day she interviews a woman, a judge or an attorney. So if you really want to support the women and hear how they're supporting each other, I would definitely listen to her podcast.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check it out. Thank you for letting me know about that, and thank you for being a guest on ReSaulved. And yeah, I hope to hear in the coming months how you have watched every single episode and every single season, and you're madly in love with Better Call Saul.
Well,
awesome.
bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too.